It's science.
All right, here we are. This is your host, Justin Romer, for the Starving Podcast. We are without our co-host today, Jordan Bishop, but we have a special guest, Saxon Panchik's here with me today. We're filming this together. We're super excited to have him on. As most of you know, he is 9th at the CrossFit Games last year as an individual male. It's his second year competing at the CrossFit Games. He's in no intention done competing, and we'll go over today, a lot of stuff about his life, his upcoming marriage, what his plans are in the future, and what the plans are for him in the future of the sport of CrossFit. So, Saxon, say hello, man.
Hey guys, and thank you, Justin, for having me on.
Absolutely, dude. It's been a great time here in Ohio. So this is the first time I've actually met Saxon. I've been working with him for over a year now, and I've learned so much about him as an athlete and as a person and his lifestyle. And, coming up soon at the start of next year, he's going to be getting married. He's been a CrossFit Games athlete, and he just started a pretty new gym with his twin brother, Spence, who I also had the pleasure of meeting. But I mean, man, what's next for you? It seems like you've done pretty much, everything you can do at this point as a 23-year-old. What are you planning to do next? What are your goals 10 years from now?
Yeah. So there's a lot. 10 years is a long time to look ahead. By the time that 10 years is up, hopefully I'll probably still be competing as an individual. So that's one big thing is over those next 10 years, my biggest thing is just focusing on staying healthy and, continue being able to do what I'm doing right now. As for my marriage, we want to eventually start a family over here within the next year or two and continue growing the gym. The gym is something that Spencer and I both want to kind of turn into a franchise where this can be throughout all of Ohio or all over the world. It's something that we want to see how far we can really take it.
Yeah, I mean, those are some pretty hefty goals, but, based off of how far you've come in such a short period of time in your life, I don't think that me or anyone else in the world doubts that you'll be able to do that. We went to your gym already today. I got in last night, but today we went over to your gym. We switched some ropes around. We did some other types of work, and, you guys were mopping, and I'm like, the floor is like clean to me based off of all the CrossFit gyms I've been in. This floor is like pristine. You could eat off of it, and you're sitting there, you're mopping it again. And I asked, how often do you mop? Every single day. We mop the floor every single day. And I'll tell you guys, CrossFit Cliffside is the cleanest gym that I've ever been to. And I think that, I really do truly mean that. And I've been to a lot of gyms. Tell our listeners a little bit about why you decide to present the gym in this way to your members, and what do you think the benefits are?
Absolutely. And just by looks, how your gym looks can easily determine, how people perceive your gym. If you come into a gym and you never know who's going to walk in the door throughout the day, and if they come in and they see a dirty gym, like right away they could leave the door, and that one person is equal to telling 10 people that. And it's the same thing as a business model that we use is every single person that walks in the door and signs up, I like to think that they're equivalent to another 5 or 10 different people, and that's something we talked about yesterday. But that goes for the good and also the bad. So obviously we want to make as much good from that gym as we can, and that just starts with presenting something nice and clean, and people like new.
Yeah, no, this is a good point. I think a lot of gyms out there like Orange Theory and some others. Get out of here, Orange Theory. We're just kidding. There's gyms for everybody out there, and as long as you're consistent with your fitness, this is great. But, there are gyms out there like Orange Theory that provide a group fitness atmosphere, and you walk into their gyms, and they're really nice-looking gyms, and this wave of your garage gym, kind of grudgy CrossFit gym is maybe something in the past, and I really do support the model that you guys use of keeping your gym clean and really pristine. It's really good. So the next question sort of, related more towards your individual career in the CrossFit Games in general. So over the past year and a half or so, Greg Glassman's perspective in showcasing the competitive side of the sport has obviously taken a downward trend. And if this isn't shown by the cut of regionals, here's some other statistics. So the actual number of days of competing at the CrossFit Games in 2016 was 5 days across 15 events. And it was actually 2 locations. They were at the ranch, right?
Yeah.
And then they were also in Madison. And then 2018 comes around, still 5 days, 14 events. And then last year, 4 days, 12 events, and they cut athletes. Almost at every stage, they got to the top 10. So what is sort of your unbiased opinion about whether this sport is going to stay alive under the CrossFit HQ or in general?
Yeah, I don't think, I can't see it going anywhere because I think there's definitely a market for it. And with all of these sanctioned events around, that's creating the market, and it's doing nothing but it's growing the market for the competitive side of CrossFit. And I think what it's turning more towards is making it accessible for a lot of different people now. It used to be something a little more exclusive, which I would think might be the only concern. But other than that, I think everything is happening for a reason. I think it's all good because regardless, it's reaching out to a larger community, and I think that's kind of how he's perceiving it, and that's kind of his plan. And it's how anything great starts, by bringing all of these countries in. Yes, right now they might not have the true fittest person in that country, but what's happening is next year you see, oh, I've beaten that guy in workouts, or I'm fitter than that guy, and it's pushing all of these different countries to want to go compete at the CrossFit Games even more. And eventually it might take 10 years for it to finally have the true fittest person in that country at the Games, but it all starts somewhere. And it's just a matter of keeping it alive and focusing on the longevity through that. So I think change is good, but you never know what's going to happen. And with all of these sanctioned events, some of these guys can easily give the CrossFit Games and kind of the platform that they're creating, it's just as big as the CrossFit Games.
Yeah. I mean, the synthesis of having other countries a part of this is pretty special, and I think that obviously I asked the question, but I don't want the CrossFit Games to go anywhere. Obviously, neither do you and a lot of other people and our listeners listening to this. But it's just it's something to take note, and you hope that the sport, from the competitive side, either stays around with CrossFit HQ or someone else picks this up. And I know we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but with Rogue as a major player in regards to the equipment that they supply for the CrossFit Games and stuff like that, do you think it's out of the question that Rogue will just come in and just take over this entire CrossFit Games portion?
I think it's something that could happen, but again, it all depends, and it depends on how people react. People can react by saying we like the old format because nobody likes change, and people could jump on the wagon of okay, let's keep it how it was. And what can happen is eventually CrossFit can kind of come up and be hey, this is what we created now. It may not have been there at the time, but this is what it grew into. And as an affiliate owner, and an athlete, you can look at it from two different sides. So I'm kind of torn by seeing what CrossFit's doing, and I think it's really good for the community aspect of CrossFit. But as for competitive athletes, it kind of hurts a little bit because it's almost that platform of being known to be the top 20, 30, 40 fittest athletes in the world is now having 160 athletes at the CrossFit Games, and it kind of watered down, who these athletes are. So that's kind of where I am. It's kind of torn between being an affiliate owner and being an athlete, and I think that's how a lot of other people feel. But I think it's one thing to have an open mind and understand that everything plays out, and there's nothing that we can do. All we can do is train to be the fittest, and if you're the fittest, it doesn't matter what competition you go into. The goal is, no matter what, go in there and win.
Yeah, and this is just the mindset of a competitor. It doesn't matter whether your coach in football decides you're going to be a linebacker or you're going to be a tight end. you go out there and you compete if you're a competitor and you like the sport. So it's not the exact, it's not exactly analogous, but you know, you got to go out there and compete in a sport if you plan to call yourself an athlete.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
So that you just came back from the CrossFit Games a couple months ago. You know, I'm sitting there with my mother-in-law. We're like screaming at the TV and watching you, you know, with this sprint event and a lot of the other events you're competing at. But, you know, how does it feel to be ninth at the CrossFit Games? And tell us why you hated this.
Yeah, so I had a lot of mixed feelings. So I've been to the CrossFit Games 2 times, and last year was the first time that I went. And, you know, I was excited to be there, and I kind of got caught up in, you know, finally making it and being able to make it through all of those events. And it was just a matter of, like, kind of getting through the weekend, and that wasn't the right mindset that I had. And I kind of reevaluated after the games, and that's just not who I was. Like, I wanted to be there to win. And this year at the games, I obviously improved, and I was always on the verge of getting cut. So I was always out there. I felt like my life was on the line where, you know, my season could end at this day, early on in the competition, or I can fight and, you know, make it through the entire weekend. So finishing 9th, I kind of had this feeling of I'm better than that. And, you know, I was a little upset about that placing. Again, it's nothing that you can be too upset with because, you know, you're at the CrossFit Games, you made the final cut. But deep down, I just felt like I had more in me. And it was just, as soon as I came back, I told you, I felt like I wasn't recovering. So we got down to work, and we figured out how I can increase maybe my volume or make sure my body's recovering through my nutrition. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways I had from the CrossFit Games was dialing on that nutrition so I don't ever have to feel like that. If I'm going out, I want to go out on my terms, going down swinging, not based off of, you know, what I was putting in my body.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, we've worked a lot with your nutrition, and we constantly tweak things. You know, me as your coach, I've become a lot better of a coach just by working with you because I realize how complex the human physiology is when it comes to high performance athletes like yourself, and how much food you typically have to take in to stay recovered and feel good. You know, yeah, I remember talking to you about being ninth. Like, I was super excited about it, obviously, because you improved. It's almost 10 spaces from the prior year. And, you know, we obviously worked with you throughout that year. So it's, you know, super satisfying for us to be a small part in that. I remember talking to you, you're like, nah, man, this isn't what I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to come out here and win, you know, and like you said, a part of you, I think, was, you know, happy about being able to make that last cut. And then part of it was like, but I wanted to be on the podium. Like, I want to win the games. And I think this has to be the goal. Like, no CrossFit athlete ever won first that was like happy with second.
Yeah.
You know, nobody came through that was like, yeah, man, I'm so happy I got second. Like, I'm good, you know? They never went back and won first. Matt keeps winning first, and first is still not good enough, right? Because he needs to win first again, and he needs to prove it to himself again. And this is the mentality that you have. Like, ninth is not where you want it to be.
Absolutely.
And you got to respect that, absolutely. Yeah, so also, I mean, talk about this. Like, you were on the verge of getting cut after 30, 20, 10.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Even before that, even 50.
Yeah.
50, 40, 30,
How?
20, 10.
Yeah, yeah. So this is so many cuts, and this is so much pressure, and like, just talk through about like, how did you do that?
I love making it interesting.
Like, what was the thought process going through before that? Did it change any versus a regular event? Like, you did a lot of sanctionals this year. Mm-hmm. Did your, you know, your mindset change to be able to push through and get in the top every time?
So competing, it was consistency is always key, and that's how it's always been at the CrossFit Games. Like, you could go easily any other previous year and place 10th to 15th in, you know, 95% of the events, and you'd place probably pretty close to the top 5. And if you did that this year, early on, that's not good enough, and you could easily get cut. And I like to think of it as, so you had 12 events, and each event was one max effort mile, and if you didn't finish in the top percentile on that mile run, like, your weekend was over. So every single time you were going out there for an event, you were laying everything that you had. Like, there was no reserve, like, I need to feel good for this next event. We didn't know any of the other events, so all you knew is you had one task at hand, and it was lay your training out there and see what you're capable of, and it's either good or it's not good enough. And I felt like I was pretty good for about 6 effort miles, and that got me into the top 10. And like we were talking about with my nutrition, I felt like the turnover for each event became so quickly because there was only 2 heats, that I felt like I wasn't prepared enough by having food and stuff ready, and my body just wasn't recovering. And after 6 max effort miles, how many more max effort miles can you run and still hit that top time? Eventually something has to give. So that's kind of how I felt about it.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, and we discussed this, and we're going to continue to work on a game plan that's going to allow you to get in solid food between events, because there just wasn't enough time in between. The problem with this for our listeners is there's a lot of blood that essentially circulates to the stomach to help digestion and absorption when you're not drinking fast-acting small molecules or proteins like whey and dextrose powder. These are fast-acting, so we're getting Saxon a lot of shakes and things like that to recover between events. But you have to get in solid food every now and then too, not just in breakfast and at night. And we found that this potentially affected his performance on the last little bit. I mean, obviously there's a lot more that goes into it, but we think that we can make some room to improve there. And the blood that rushes to your stomach like that, it once the blood rushes there, it doesn't want to go to your muscle tissue, which is what you need to fuel your workouts, both anaerobically, glycolytically, and with the use of oxygen. So this is sort of something that we kind of struggled with. Like, do we get in a solid meal, or do we, continue to drink the shakes? And we tried to culminate sort of a synthesis of this, and we think there just wasn't enough time to get in enough food that last day, So that's, it's an important point. It's something to work on. And nutrition is a huge part of where we come in for Saxon. So we have to step up next year when he's at the games, and make sure that we're more diligent about getting in the caloric intake he needs to sustain a performance like that. So talking about high-level athletes and being involved in the sport, you've been involved in the sport a while, even before you started, because you were watching your older brother, Scott.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to you about this, I don't know, maybe like a month before the games, like after I knew you qualified, 3 weeks before. I said, what is it going to take for you to be better than Scott? Yeah. And I texted you this, and I wanted to see what your answer was. Do you remember what you told me?
I do remember now. It was a while back, but it was watch this year. Yeah. That was the biggest thing. Scott was always someone. He's about 9 years older than me, and throughout all of my childhood, I was always striving to try and beat him in anything and everything that I could. And what that did was that elevated a lot for both of us. One, that I'm basing my performance in whether it's in CrossFit or whether it's playing pickup basketball or whatever it is, off someone much older than me. And he knows that he can't get beat by a little brother. So I felt like it helped me mature a lot faster, like even just as a brother and a human being, like socially and emotionally, like, I felt like I tried to carry myself like a 25-year-old when I was 17 years old. And it allowed me to mature a little quicker than I probably should have, which is amazing. But even training-wise, he always kept me focusing on lighter weights and just trying to beat him in any workout that we did. And that pushed me to get to a high level very quickly, I felt like. And now as he's getting a little older and I'm kind of reaching that 24, 25 where he was kicking my butt, his recovery's slowing down a little bit. So I felt like it's allowing him to, continue at a high level here too, because, no matter what, whether I was younger than him and whether he's older than me, we're basing, the best performance off someone right in their prime.
Yeah. You hear that, Scott? You're getting old, dude. Getting old. No, Scott's obviously had a great career in the sport. He's going to continue to do really well in the sport. And like you said, you're grateful that he got you involved in the sport and that he's able to push you in the way that he has for all these years, and there's something to be said. I mean, I know a lot of gyms where there's like one really good athlete, and that's sort of an anomaly. A lot of times you see CrossFit gyms and there are like 3 or 4 games athletes at the same gym. Mm-hmm. And it's because they kind of cultivate this atmosphere where they have high-level performers like right there. And intensity is a big part of this game. It's probably one of the most important, and you have to have it. So having people around you like Spence and like Scott, and me. I mean, I'm gonna whoop you in this workout 20.1 tonight. That's just a joke, guys. I'm just a nutrition coach, but it's gonna be a good time. We're gonna throw down 20.1 tonight, and it's a good time to be around these guys and watching them compete. So I remember the first time that we started working together at the very beginning. Your biggest struggle was you wanted to put on a little bit of size, and we definitely covered that, even though one of the announcers at the game said you look like you weigh 170. I don't really know what's wrong with that guy, but we definitely put a lot of size on you, and you had we did some food sensitivity testing based on your DNA. It's genotyping, and we'll do a separate podcast sort of about this and why we do this DNA data for some of our athletes, but we found that you were, had a sensitivity to lactose, and you were drinking a lot of milk at the time. So, that's how you were getting a lot of calories in. So we had to sort of exclude this and find things to sort of replace to get your, total caloric intake. How did you go about changing that and shifting your diet away from something that was, calorically based a lot off of milk to something that, was more intrinsic for you?
Yeah. So the biggest thing was I always focused on trying to increase weight on my own, was increase my calories. And that was through whole milk and peanut butter. And I would just pound both of those things throughout the day, the middle of the night. And what that did was it replaced a lot of meals. So it was kind of like how I competed this year. I did a lot of shakes and things like that, but I think it's much more important to focus on getting whole foods in your body rather than things that are just high in calories. And that was the biggest thing that you taught me, was eat more frequently. They might be smaller meals, but that kind of took place of those shakes that was allowing me to keep my body weight up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I mean, you want a lot of variance in your diet. There are a lot of diets out there like paleo, like it restricts food composition. This isn't good. Like if your body can digest lactose, it has the LCT gene, right? And your body digests lactose well, why can't you have milk? And this is something that I struggle with when I, even vegans and vegetarians, I get the moral and the ethics side of it. But if you're doing that to lose weight and things like that, based on these food composition diets, it kind of leaves you a little bit limited. I mean, the body's pretty resilient, and epigenetically, we're inclined to be able to tolerate different foods than, just a Paleolithic diet, for example. So that's why we get the DNA testing done. We found out that Saxon was sensitive to certain foods, not sensitive to others, which can cause fatigue, inflammation. Imagine lung inflammation from a certain food, and then you try to go work out. This isn't good, right? You can't adapt from your training. So yeah, a big focus for us when we started working with Saxon was to eliminate these food sensitivities and intolerances, put in more whole foods, and then time up his meals correctly. Put carbohydrates around his workout times, and then put fat away from his workout times, just because we're trying to replenish glycogen and then we're trying to get fat in away from the workout window because it's hard to digest and absorb. So we came in and we were able to take a strategy like that, and it's been, especially during the off season, it's been a great way for him to put on really clean weight, build strength, and then also his work capacity, gymnastics, muscle endurance has, I would say, increased as well from last year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So even at a higher body weight, so you got to make sure you're doing, if you're trying to do some sort of a strength phase, and you're putting on weight, you got to make sure you stay in tune with your gymnastics a couple times a week. Make sure as you put on that weight that your body's and your muscle tissue is ready to take on the amount of volume that this sort of requires. So a little bit more about like your food intake and stuff like that. What is sort of a day of eating under intrinsic diet with us look like, and like what does it look like leading up to the Open?
So you guys made it pretty easy. I do 3 meals a day, and then I do 3 shakes. So when I wake up, I'm doing breakfast, and then I'll go in and I'll do a training session. After a training session, every training session, I'm always doing a shake after with some carbs. Then I would come home, I would do lunch, and then I'd go back in, hit another training session, and then followed by another shake and carbs. And then I'd come home for dinner, eat dinner, and then hang out for a little bit, relax, and then before bed, I would do some casein, protein, again with some fats before I would go to bed. And like you said, it was distributing those fats away from my training program, which I noticed significantly helped, especially with my sleep. I felt like it kind of gave me a little more of a bloated feeling and kept me satisfied throughout the middle of the night, so I didn't catch myself waking up at all, and disturbing my sleep.
Right. Yeah, and sleep is something we've also tackled. Obviously, I've gone through your bed-night routine with you, and you sleep pretty well. And for those listening, if you're trying to be a competitive athlete, and the reason he takes in 3 shakes a day is because he trains 3 separate times a day, or 2 separate times a day, and then he has a nighttime casein shake, which is a nighttime protein. But for those of you that are training this much, you need 9+, ideally closer to 11 hours of sleep for most people. And this is what Saxon typically gets in a night, with very limited wake-ups, because he keeps blue light away from his eyesight an hour and a half before bed. He sets an alarm on his phone 90 minutes before bed to take the last gulp of water. So he's not up peeing in the middle of the night. All this stuff sort of gets, it cuts up your circadian rhythm, and it's not good for recovery and stuff. So this is definitely something that we've tackled, and we have a good sort of strategy moving forward. And the other thing, a lot of nuts and seeds and fats in general have tryptophan, which is a protein that promotes sleep. So this is another reason why, especially if you're not training in the afternoon, you want to have a lot of fat before going to bed, away from the workout window and before sleep. It actually works out quite nicely like that. So in a typical meal, like how many grams of protein are you having, or ounces of meat are you having? How many carbohydrates are you having?
Yeah.
Like, how does this work?
Yeah, so right now with each meal, what I'm doing is 4 ounces of protein. So for breakfast, I'll do 4 ounces of ground turkey. Then I'll do 100 grams of carbs. And then in the morning, I'll do 2 servings of fat. So that's what the breakfast looks like. And then that stays the same for my lunch and then my dinner. The only thing that's really changing is my fat, where those 2 will be 1 serving of fat. So yeah, more fat sort of packed in at night. Depending on the season and stuff, Saxon's about on his body weight in protein, maybe a little bit less, so somewhere around 180-ish. For carbohydrates, it kind of fluctuates, but it's never below 300. It's always above 300. Typically, can go upwards of 400 to 450. And then for fats, typically also pretty high, around 100 to 115 grams of fat within a day. So this is typically what we need to on sort of a just off season, maintaining calories. If we're trying to put on weight, obviously, that increases. Typically, it increases in the carb and fat content
only because you don't need much more protein than 1 gram per pound of body weight if you're taking in a decent amount of carbs anyway. So we don't really mess around with protein too much. We kind of keep that constant. This is sort of what his diet looks like, and this took a year and a half to build, like the supplements that we have him on, Beat Elite, to promote mitochondrial biogenesis, digestive enzymes to help the digestion of potentially some food sensitivities that he has, salt, which he also includes in his shakes post-workout. This is a GLUT transporter, so it helps the recovery and replenishment of glycogen in the muscle. Like all of these types of things, we make sure he gets a lot of dietary iron from cooking in an iron skillet, and also getting red meat two to 3-ish times a week, depending on the week. Only because iron, is a big transporter, along with vitamin B12, of oxygenated blood to muscle tissue. So if you don't have enough iron in your system, this could be pretty bad. So this is something that took a really long time, and his diet looks like no one else's, just like everyone else's diet with the intrinsic diet doesn't look the same either. And it really takes a lot of time to learn about the athlete and to do this. The intrinsic diet is something that we do, and we encompass everything. The keto, we have people on keto that we feel can benefit from being fat adapted. We have people on intermittent fasting that feel that they're very busy with their schedule and they're not high performance athletes. Every diet is sort of made for the person and their schedule, and they know exactly what to eat, when to eat it for every meal. And this is something that we've come in now, and I'm actually here this weekend to watch him and Spence do the open workout, but also to give a nutrition seminar. So, what is it about the intrinsic diet and our coaching that sort of made you want to use this for your members in your gym?
Yeah, you summed it up pretty well. After working with you guys for, a year and a half?
Yeah, about a year and a half, I think, yeah.
Working with you guys for a year and a half, we finally fine-tuned things and figured out how well this actually is working. And I'm really big on anything that I'm going to give to our members. It's something that I truly believe in, and I want to give them the same opportunity that I have. And, by doing that, it was getting you out here to kind of work with those guys and give them the opportunity that, you gave me. So that's something I really believe in. And with this diet, you've made it so simple. The first week, it takes a little thinking and measuring things out, but after doing it for 2 weeks, you get into the rhythm and you know exactly what you're eating, and it kind of takes the thinking out of everything. You know exactly what you're having for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and when you're going to be having it, and when you're going to have your shakes, and you never have to stress about, when am I going to eat or what am I going to eat? You have it all kind of planned out. So it's super simple, and I'm excited to see the members kind of transform exactly like I did.
Yeah, no, we're definitely excited to work with your members. You have a lot of different types of members at your gym, and I can already tell that they love CrossFit Cliffside and working with you guys, your programming, your coaches. You got such a great group of people around you, Spence and your family, and we want to continue to support your mission to win the CrossFit Games. I'd say we did a good job here. Thanks for answering all the questions.
Absolutely.
I think we got some good stuff for all of you guys coming up, and keep an eye on this guy. He's young. He's hungry. He wants to win the CrossFit Games. Almost every time I talk to him, it's something about how he's trying to improve his performance so that he can win. It's what his major focus is, besides his wife Taylor and getting married next year. And he'll do it. I have no doubt that he'll do it. So that's going to conclude the Starving Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Romer, with Saxon Panchik. We're going to throw down 20.1, about to get freaky. Big Shirt Gang Gang. You know how it is. Follow us on Instagram at Consistency Breeds Growth. consistency_breeds_growth, or email us at consistencybreedsgrowth@gmail.com. If anybody wants to check out CrossFit Cliffside, Saxon, you have a website and things you want to shoot out?
And this just goes for anything. If you have questions about diet, you know exactly who to reach out to. And if you have any questions about any type of training or how you can increase your performance, like, feel free to reach out. My email is crossfitcliffside@gmail.com. You can check out our website, crossfitcliffside.com, making it pretty simple for you guys. But yeah, feel free to reach out with any types of questions that anyone has. Anything, we're more than happy to answer.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks so much for coming on today. We appreciate it. Let's get 20.1 done. Let's get freaky.
Yeah, buddy.
Peace.
Science.